much. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I just realized that I'm probably the only exchange representative among speakers for this session. Great honor of mine. Thank you. So I just want to ask, how many of you actually have laser eyes on social Twitter? Okay. I have that too. And for those who don't have that, I also believe that you have full conviction in Bitcoin, otherwise you won't be here today. I want to talk about Bitcoin's next chapters because I think it's important for both me personally as well as for our business as we think about what we are building for, because as builders, we are essentially investors as well. And I think also as an individual, because we're investing in the future, in building for the future. And I would not have been here if not for Bitcoin, and OKcoin would not have been here if not for Bitcoin. So I think it's important to talk about how we see the world and how we see Bitcoin evolve as the foundation for a new world. This one. Let's see. Oops. Okay. Okay, thank you. As you can tell, I don't have a developer background. Quickly about ourselves, we are based in San Francisco. Whenever we were asked when we were founded, I always have two answers. One is in 2013, and one is in 2017, because we originally founded in 2013, but we were the largest China exchange. But then when the policy changed in 2017, we decided to migrate out of China into US, and that's when we basically reinvent ourselves. So we consider 17 as our reborn. As I mentioned, we are licensed in US. We are actually one of the few exchanges that enable Lightning, and I'll talk about that and share some of our learnings with you. I want to talk a little bit about Bitcoin's next chapter in the concept of road to hyperbitcoinization, because I think that is a hot topic in the industry, and people have been talking about what that exactly looks like and how we get there. The way I see it, I think there are different utilities that Bitcoin can bring to the society, and because of different utilities, different use cases that Bitcoin can bring, you see different narrative of Bitcoin evolving. And I think the interesting thing of that is, Bitcoin has many different layers of utility that comes with it because of the way it is designed. But there are also a lot of room for continued building on top of it. That's why, and also coming with that continued adoption curve. And that's also why we will continue to see the changing narrative of what Bitcoin is, because I got asked a lot about what is Bitcoin. And I think the answer to that can vary depending on who the audience are. I'll talk about each of that one by one. But I think the first step, as we have seen over the last 2 years, I think this one is pretty much done. It took Bitcoin almost probably 10 years plus to get here, to be recognized as a legit asset class. I think the domino started to fall really in 2020 when COVID started, and people started to see that Bitcoin really has that value that it promised, and a larger population started to see it, and that's where you see Bitcoin price start to go up. And this is what the market sees, right? This is what the CNBC and Bloomberg and Wall Street investors see. They see Bitcoin price going up. They see Bitcoin as a better hedge against inflation, a better investment vehicle than gold or any other alternatives out there. And to be honest, over the last, not year, but since January 1st, 2021, Bitcoin has been performing pretty well. If you really zoom out, despite all the quote-unquote volatility that we're talking about, it's up by 250%, outperforming most of the asset class there. And the biggest news, I think, in this arena is the ProShare Bitcoin Futures ETF. That was the first one that got launched. And that was a big milestone for the industry. More in the sense that I think it established the legitimacy of Bitcoin as an asset class with a larger audience, that it's not a scam, it's not another tulip scam. But what is really going on, I think behind the scene, which I think everyone in the room really knows this, is all the building efforts that have been going on around solidifying the foundation, fundamentals, and delivering the use cases. First of all, as the layer for store of value, because for it to be a solid store of value, it has to be a hard asset, a hard money, and censorship and secure money layer. And for that, you need developers working on it, right? And that's where, over the last 2 years, we've seen different parties coming in and support the independent Bitcoin developers, us included, and I think that is a huge change versus a couple of years ago. Obviously, we see El Salvador, which basically add another use case on top of the store of value. We went through a China flood, obviously, with the miner migration out of China. Everyone got panicked and then realized actually the network is actually very resilient, anti-fragile, and that basically is another testament. And it's a de-risking factor, another de-risking factor for the Bitcoin network as a quote-unquote store of value, as a hard money layer. And most recently, obviously, Taproot, right? Continue to build on top of it, adding smart contract capabilities, adding room for increasing privacy. All these are, I think, is basically building the network. That's what I think the media is not picking up. The media is more focused on price, but what is really driving the long-term price movement, why we are saying that the Bitcoin price has been up and down all the time, but longer term, zoom out, it's actually going up. It's because of all these building efforts behind the scene that contribute to the value of Bitcoin as the foundational layer. But interestingly, I think I remember in 2020, I was kind of looking at Bitcoin price, and I was trying to, think about what comes ahead. And Goldman came out with a research basically saying Bitcoin is not an asset class. So I was like, how come it's not an asset class? So I wrote a blog about it. And now fast forward 12 months, everyone is saying Bitcoin is an asset class. But the problem is it's not just an asset class, right? And that's the biggest risk we're seeing, particularly with the ETF being launched. It's not just an asset class, and we shouldn't let it become just an asset class, because if that's the case, then we basically fail, because we are not building this just for having an asset class. We're not building this just for creating another decoration to the existing system. We're building an exit. We're building an alternative system, and that alternative system has to be being able to run in parallel to the existing system. And there is a lot of other extra layer of building on top of it that need to happen. But this message, I think, is really important, because now there's no debate about Bitcoin. Is Bitcoin an asset class? Now the debate is really around, is it just an asset class? No, it's not. So that's where I think what have brought all of us here, which is what's the second step for Bitcoin? What's the narrative? The narrative is Bitcoin is a global payment network. It's not just a store of value. But store of value has to come first. So you cannot have a payment network building on top of the old store of value fiat system. You have to have your own store of value, and then you build a payment network on top of it. But that medium of exchange step is going to be really important, because you got to be able to allow people to use whatever they store their value in. And the ability to pay for their everyday life with what value they're storing is going to be critically important. I don't want to spend too much time talking about this, because I think a lot of different sessions have been discussing how and when and what are the challenges about Lightning stuff. But again, I'm very proud to say that we are the only US exchange that supports Lightning. Thank you. And I do want to share some of the learnings from our side, because we've been doing it for a while, not so long. It's, it's compared to many other efforts out there, it's still small, but we basically launched our Lightning integration in March the 4th, 2021. We've been working on it carefully, because obviously we have no previous institutional knowledge about this, so we're kind of doing it with help, with a lot of help from the community, obviously, particularly including Lightning Lab. But right now, the node, our public capacity for our node for OKcoin is 44 Bitcoin. We now have 90 plus minus channels. We're the 14th largest node out there. These are all public information. We don't have a automatic tool to track our capacity evolution, unfortunately, but we've been taking notes, and based on our own notes, our capacity have been growing over 75% over the last 3 months, and more than 300% over the last 5 months. Right now, we don't charge routing fee on our Lightning node. We don't charge deposit fee. We charge a small amount of withdrawal fee to cover some of our operational costs. And our Lightning routing error has been greatly reduced. The first month, I think our routing error was like 20% plus, and it was really painful. Now it's about 5%. But even this 5% is still quite painful for those customers who end up having those routing errors. It's quite painful experience. I'll talk a little bit about that later. For users on our platform who end up using Lightning, it's kind of interesting. We look at the data. It actually spans over 65 countries. It's quite wide a range of customers. But more interestingly, from a number of transaction perspective, USA is actually the #1 source of country for customers using Lightning on our platform, 32%. Pakistan is the next, 21%. Netherlands, 16%. I'm not sure if it's because of Plan B influence, but somehow it's up there. Morocco, 6%. But when we look at the transaction volume, volume-wise, actually, US is the largest. I think it's probably more than 80% of all the Lightning transaction volume that happened on our platform to date. The transaction per user per month, we also see, at least within our own platform, that number has been gradually going up. The first month in March, average transaction number is about less than 4 times a month per user. Now it's close to 9. So it's interesting to see some of those users continue to use it and increasing the usage of it. The average Lightning transaction size has also dropped. It will be interesting to hear from audience what you think of this, but initially we have 300,000. I think the early month is probably even larger than that. But most recently we see the average size is about less than 100,000 sats. We initially started seeing a very balanced mix between Lightning deposit and Lightning withdrawal. Now we actually see more Lightning withdrawal. Users actually come to buy Bitcoin or through other ways, and then they withdraw sats into either their own node or their own wallet or other sources. And we also did a small survey with the customers who actually use our Lightning, and we want to know why they're using it, what they're doing. And it's interesting, and I think it's probably not a surprise. 95% are actually using it for low fee. 89% like the speed. They like the fact that it's instant. And then about 60% actually just want to do it because they want to support building the larger Bitcoin system, which is great to see. And we also have some interesting anecdotes which speak to the fact that when people use Lightning, there are so many different use cases. There are people, we have customers who use it because they use it to pay for their kids' weekly allowance in Satoshis. And he basically said if it were not for Lightning, he would not be able to do this for their kids in such an easy way. We also obviously have people who mine at their home, so they mine it, and then they use Lightning to move Bitcoin from one place to another. And then we also have this customer, I think it's from Asia somewhere. He retired. I don't know if it's he or she, but this customer retired, and then he started to play Lightning-enabled games and earn Satoshi. And somehow he seems to be making a lot of money in that way and use Lightning to do that. So it's interesting, but there are a couple of things that I think we have learned in the process that we're still kind of working through, and if anyone in the audience have feedback and can help, I would love to continue that conversation later. On the left-hand side is more technical questions. Obviously, we still have routing errors. It's 5% routing error, and it's quite painful for customers who actually found themselves in those routing errors. And it's a little bit hard to also, the way it is designed right now, it's hard to identify those upfront. We have to wait for those transactions to complete, and generally sometimes it takes a long time. So sometimes customers have to wait and see if their transaction doesn't go through immediately. Then it's some wait, a day or two, and sometimes longer. And the other thing that is painful is that the overall maintenance is quite cumbersome and manual. The channel balancing, there's no tool about automating that. So what we end up doing, our team, is basically they have to do daily assessment, daily check, and see if they need to balance the channel. There's really no good way of balancing those channels. Like sometimes if some of the channel doesn't work, the best way to do is actually to close out that channel and reopen a new one. But it's not the best way to scale. And it's really hard. Like when we want to look at data through our Lightning efforts, there's no automatic tool for us to check everything. Like we have to do a lot of tracking manually and go to different places. So if anyone in the audience want to work on some of those and help industry, help us, that will actually be great. But these are things that we are running into, the main technical problems or operational problems that we run into, and I'm sure probably a lot of the other participants in this space run into as well. If we can address this effectively as an industry, it will help scale and efficiency in a tremendous way. The right-hand side too are probably more on our side, which is the number one is discoverability of Lightning. Right now we only enable it on our web, and it's kind of embedded in the deposit withdrawal function. So it's just a function available. So it's not a very easily discovered feature. As a result of that, and I think there's also a lot of educational hurdle that the customer has to go through to be able to use it. So as a result of that, only a single-digit % of our customers actually have been using Lightning on our platform. So it would be, our team is going to work on that. It would take some time because there's some other dependability in the product that we need to bring it over, but we want to add it to our mobile app, and we want to make it easy for people when they do other things on our platform, buy, sell, earn, they can also easily withdraw and deposit or send to their families in stats. And the other second obstacle is usability. Again, Lightning is not the most easy thing to use out there, right? You actually, again, you need to get comfortable with using it. You need to know how to make all the deposit and withdraw. It's not like a credit card where when customers use it, they don't have to worry about the technological foundation. And the other side of it is also commercial connectivity. How many commerce, how many merchants actually accept it? Where are the use cases that you, instead of just stacking it, how can you actually use it? I think that also need to evolve a little bit. Part of it is our work, connecting with more merchants in the ecosystem, but part of it is also how the overall ecosystem will evolve. But we have I personally have a lot of confidence in this, but I do think that it's still pretty early stage for us as a whole industry. I think there's, compared to the size of the transaction that has been happening on the traditional rail, Visa, MasterCard, and others versus what we are seeing today in Lightning, I think there's a lot of room for us to work on. I think the third piece, which will be interesting and important, and again, I think these steps probably don't happen sequentially. Some of them happen at the same time, but for this to really take off and be that hyper-bitcoinization stage, the next step is to view Bitcoin as the unit of count. I.e., not only just use it to store value, not only just use it to pay, but also use it as the anchor, right? Whenever you use other stuff, either quote unquote fiat currency or other cryptocurrency, anchor against Bitcoin, but ultimately anchor against sats. That's where, when that happens, I think we'll end up not only seeing a global payment network, but also global money network. And that in itself is huge. And an important element of that, I think it's sats, right? We've been talking about sats for a long time as an industry. I think we're still early stage because exactly where we are, the first two steps haven't really been fully realized yet. The price of Bitcoin has been going up. I think at this point, when we look at 60,000 plus per Bitcoin price, people start to feel like, okay, maybe we should look at sats and make it smaller unit so that when people think about Bitcoin versus Doge and SHIB, it's more or less comparable from a price point perspective. And we did also ask our customers what they think, and at least obviously it's not counterintuitive at all. 94% of our Lightning users say they wanted to see sats. So we've been actually working on this for a bit. We want to bring sats mode to our platform in our app. There is a feature that's coming up. I think it's probably in 1 or 2 weeks. I want to give you guys a little peek there and see what it is. Now, I'm super excited about that, but caveat is I think it's another baby step. I don't think that's everything. There are actually a lot of complexity related to making it sats mode. What you see is basically giving customers an option to stack sats in a sats mode and see how much they're buying in the units of sats. But then there are also other elements coming with it. They're about educational side of things, but then there are also liquidity, right? The market exchange and how do you actually denominate price in sats and all that. There's a whole lot of complexity coming with it. What we will be coming out is just one little step, again, pushing the perception, pushing how people see it. And I think as more and more people start to show it in that way, mentality hopefully will start to shift. And start to see it as a unit account over time. The last step I think will be also interesting is what we have in Bitcoin different from traditional money, either fiat money or gold, is that it's actually online. It's programmable, right? And that in itself, the power of that programmable money hasn't really been fully unleashed yet. But the good thing is we are seeing Taproot being activated. That's a huge, big step. We're also seeing a lot of other parties trying to build on top of Bitcoin. We are a big believer in that, and we support some of those projects doing that work. In order for us to really build this into a real exit, it has to be a closed loop system. It cannot be just an asset being attached to the existing system. And for that, it means that it's not only asset class and not only a payment, it's not only a money network, it's also a whole social network, how we interact with each other individually or organizationally. And that has to be able to build into a smart contract. And I think that will come at some point, but again, we're pretty early stage. And I think what it really excites me about the whole thing is Bitcoin is really here to challenge the status quo. We have to ask why something cannot be done differently. And when we open up that door, we can and have more and more talents like all of you working on this, building on this, I think we'll probably start to see things shift. But these are pretty big stuff, right? Like if we think about even just, for a minute, I just put on an investor hat and think about whether I want to invest in Bitcoin, where I want to invest my money. This is huge. This is basically going to replace everything that we're living, not only the financial system, but like everything. So I think this is huge. From our perspective, we'll continue to building with the ecosystem, because I think the biggest risk right now when Bitcoin's value as the store of value is established is wall streetization. And the only counter to that is to continue to build, support the Bitcoin developers, support and building on top of the Lightning Network, promote the sats, enable smart contract building on top of Bitcoin, in Bitcoin, or in parallel to Bitcoin that speak to Bitcoin, and that interoperability is going to be huge in the future. And I think it's exciting because we're only seeing the beginning of it, a very small tip of the iceberg. And I've seen this data. I'm sure many of you have been seeing it, the current wallet, Bitcoin wallet address is just a small fraction of everyone out there. And even those with bank account, it's incomparable. Like it's just a small tip of the iceberg. So I think it's really the beginning of everything. And finally, I want to show you a video that one of our team took. They came to El Salvador a couple months ago, and they took this video and a couple others, but this one is one of my favorite because it really show what Bitcoin is. It's basically hope for many people who don't have the luxury of hope before, and I think it's powerful. That individual empowerment is really powerful. Enjoy.
It's the barber shop here in Ozone. We're gonna get a haircut and we're going to pay with Bitcoin. ¿Cuándo fue la primera vez, Lili, que usted escuchó sobre Bitcoin?
Quizás hace 2 años.
Aquí en Ozone. ¿Y lo empezó a ocupar desde ese momento que escuchó sobre Bitcoin?
No.
¿Cuánto tiempo pasó desde que usted supo para empezar a ocupar?
Quizás como 6 meses. Sentí la confianza.
Ok. ¿Qué beneficios ve usted?
Por ejemplo, yo tengo dinero en el banco. Y allí, a veces en el año, lo más que me dan son $3 de ganancia, digamos. Y en esto, yo había tenido ganancias de hasta $500. Depende de lo que uno tenga.
Sí.
Con ese hemos terminado de construir la casa.
Ah, qué chivo.
Ajá, entonces yo lo veo bastante favorable.
¿Cuánto lo voy a cancelar? Con Bitcoin le puedo pagar. Va, con ese código. We're going to pay Lily $2. Ya está. Ah, ya, Satoshi.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much, Hong.